The encounter at Nova Heights. The crystalline spires of celestial prime pierced the violet sky like frozen music, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 moons in an endless symphony of color. Among these architectural marvels stood the Nova Heights Concert Hall, its sweeping curves designed to capture and amplify sound in ways that human engineering had never achieved. Tonight, its halls would witness an encounter that would shake the foundations of alien aristocracy. Aria Kane stood in the service entrance, clutching her ancient violin case. At 22, she had spent most of her life in the human quarter of Celestial Prime, playing music in underground clubs where humans and lower-caste aliens gathered to escape the crushing weight of aristocratic rule. Her dark hair was tied back simply, her clothes clean but worn, the best she could afford on a street musician's earnings. The concert hall's cleaning staff had smuggled her in, touched by her dedication to music and her dream of playing in a real concert hall, if only once. They had chosen their moment well. The annual Celestial Symphony was about to begin, and the staff was too busy attending to the elite guests to notice one more shadow in the wings. Lady Selenera Voss swept through the main entrance like liquid starlight, her crystalline skin catching and refracting the hall's illumination in mesmerizing patterns. As the most influential member of the Celestial Prime Arts Council, her presence at the symphony was expected, her word law in all matters of cultural significance. Her head bore the distinctive crest of the Voss family, living crystals that grew in patterns reflecting their bearers' genetic heritage. Unknown to the gathered aristocrats, Aria had positioned herself in a service alcove near the grand staircase. As the elite of Celestial Prime gathered for pre-concert refreshments, she lifted her violin to her shoulder. The instrument was old, earth-made, passed down through generations of her adoptive family. Its wood held memories of another world, another time. The first notes of the ancient earth melody floated through the air, cutting through the artificial perfection of the hall's atmosphere. Heads turned, conversations stopped. The song spoke of loss, of longing, of hope that refused to die. It was a piece that Aria had found in her adoption records, the only link to her birth parents. Lady Selenera froze mid-conversation, her crystalline features rigid. The melody wrapped around her like a ghost from the past, each note striking chords of memory she had buried decades ago. When she turned toward the source of the music, her eyes met Aria's. The moment stretched between them like a bridge across time. Then Selenera's features hardened into a mask of contempt. Who dared to let this human trash into Nova Heights? Her voice cut through the music like a blade of ice. Security drones materialized from their hiding spots in the walls. Aria lowered her violin, but didn't run. She had expected this reaction, had prepared for it. What she hadn't expected was the way Lady Selenera's crest crystals had resonated with her music, picking up harmonics that shouldn't have been possible without a genetic connection. "I apologize for the interruption, my lady," Aria said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I only wish to play real music, not the processed harmonics that pass for art in these halls." The gathered aliens murmured in shock at her audacity. Lady Selenera glided forward, her movement precise and predatory. "Real music? You dare to suggest that your primitive scratchings compare to our celestial harmonies?" She gestured to the security drones. "Remove this creature, and find whoever let her in. They'll need new employment by morning." As the drones moved to flank her, Aria played one final phrase, a sequence of notes that made Selenera's crest crystals chime in perfect harmony. The alien aristocrat's hand flew to her crest, her eyes widening in shock before narrowing in fury. "Wait," commanded a new voice. Council member Zack stepped forward, his sensory tendrils waving in agitation. "Lady Selenera, did you notice? The resonance pattern. It shouldn't be possible unless..." "Unless nothing," Selenera snapped. "Take her away. Now." As the drones led her toward the exit, Aria caught one last glimpse of Lady Selenera's face. Beneath the mask of contempt, something else flickered, fear, recognition, or perhaps both. Aria smiled slightly, clutching her violin case closer. She had achieved what she came for. The resonance pattern was all the proof she needed. Somewhere in Lady Selenera's past lay the key to Aria's own history. The game had begun, and all of Celestial Prime would soon learn that human determination could reshape even the most rigid of alien societies. As she was escorted from Nova Heights, Aria began planning her next move. The melody had struck a chord, and its echoes would not easily be silenced. Echoes of the past. In her private chambers atop the crystal spire, Lady Selenera Voss paced restlessly, her crystalline skin casting fractured shadows on the walls. The human girl's melody haunted her, stirring memories she had spent 20 years trying to forget. She paused before a hidden panel, pressing her palm against its surface. The wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a small alcove containing a single item, a wooden box. Her hands trembled as she lifted it, something they hadn't done since the Great Severance 2 decades ago. Inside lay a simple gold band, a human wedding ring, and a fragment of paper with musical notes scrawled across it. The same notes the girl had played. "Marcus," she whispered, allowing herself to speak his name for the first time in years. "What have I done?" Meanwhile, in the lower levels of Celestial Prime, Aria sat cross-legged on her small apartment's floor, surrounded by holographic displays. Each showed different fragments of information: historical records, news articles about Lady Selenera, and most importantly, genetic data she'd managed to obtain from the resonance reading at Nova Heights. Playing unauthorized music in Nova Heights, came a voice from her doorway. "You're either very brave or very foolish." Aria looked up to find council member Zax filling her doorframe, his sensory tendrils rippling with curiosity. She scrambled to her feet, but he waved her back down. "The resonance pattern," he said, moving into the room. "In 30 years of studying xenoharmonics, I've never seen anything like it. Your music shouldn't have been able to interact with Voss family crystals that way. Unless I carry Voss genetics," Aria finished. "Which should be impossible, given that I'm human." And yet, she gestured to her displays. Zax's tendrils curled thoughtfully. "You know about the Great Severance. Only what's in the public records. 20 years ago, half the alien noble houses suddenly cut ties with humans. No explanation given. Lady Selenera was one of the most vocal supporters of the separation. What isn't in the records," Zax said quietly, "is that before the severance, Lady Selenera was married to a human musician named Marcus Kane." Aria's breath caught. Kane, her adoptive family's name. The name on her orphanage records. What happened to him? Officially, he died in a transport accident. Unofficially, Zax's tendrils darkened. There were those who believed humans were becoming too integrated into our society. They saw mixed marriages as a threat to genetic purity, especially when children were involved. In her chambers, Selenera had opened an encrypted memory crystal, watching as a hologram sprang to life. A human man sat at a piano, his fingers dancing across the keys as a small child attempted to mimic his movements. The child's skin had a faint crystalline sheen, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. "Again, Papa," the little girl laughed. The man smiled, starting the melody over, the same melody Aria had played at Nova Heights. The hologram flickered as another figure entered the frame, a younger Selenera, her crystal crest glowing with joy as she watched her family. The present-day Selenera closed her eyes, remembering the warmth of that moment. Then came the threats, the political pressure, the choice she was forced to make, her position or her family. She had chosen position, believing it would keep them safe. Marcus had died in the accident anyway, and their daughter. She had arranged for the girl to be adopted by a human family, her hybrid nature disguised by genetic suppressants. It was meant to protect her, to give her a chance at a normal life. Back in Aria's apartment, Zax was examining her genetic data. "The suppressants are wearing off," he said. "That's why your music could interact with the Voss crystals. Your true nature is emerging." "Then it's true," Aria whispered. "Lady Selenera, The woman who had me thrown out of Nova Heights like garbage is my mother. The question is, Zax replied, what do you plan to do with that information? The political implications could be explosive. There are those who would kill to keep this quiet. Arya stood, picking up her violin. I plan to play. Music has always been how my father communicated truth, how he broke down barriers. Now it's my turn. You're playing a dangerous game, Zax warned. Lady Selenera didn't just abandon her human connections. She became their fiercest opponent. Her position, her influence, everything she has is built on that reputation. Then it's time she remembered what she lost to gain it. Arya began to play, the melody weaving through the air. As she played, tiny crystals began to form on her skin, catching the light just as her mother's did. In her chambers, Selenera watched as similar crystals began growing on her crest, resonating with a distant song. She moved to the window, looking out over the glittering expanse of celestial prime. Somewhere out there, her daughter was playing their song, not just as a challenge, but as a reminder of what they had been, and perhaps what they could be again. The melody floated through the levels of the city, bridging the gulf between wealth and poverty, between human and alien, between mother and daughter. It carried with it an undeniable truth. No amount of political pressure or social engineering could fully sever the bonds of family, or the power of music to speak what words could not. The search for truth. The archives of celestial prime stretched deep beneath the city's surface, a vast labyrinth of data crystals containing millennia of alien history. Arya moved silently through the dimly lit corridors, her newly emerged crystal formations carefully concealed beneath a hooded cloak. The genetic suppressants were failing more rapidly now, each passing day making it harder to hide her hybrid nature. She wasn't supposed to be here. Access to the deep archives was restricted to members of the noble houses and their appointed scholars. But Council Member Zax's access codes had opened the way, his quiet rebellion against decades of enforced silence. You have 1 hour, his message had said. The security loop won't hold longer than that. Find what you need and get out. Meanwhile, in the upper levels of the city, Lady Selenera faced a different kind of confrontation. Lord Nexus, head of the Purity Coalition, sat across from her in her private study, his metallic scales gleaming with barely contained menace. There are whispers, Lady Selenera, he said, his voice like grinding steel. Whispers about resonance patterns that shouldn't exist, about a human girl who plays forbidden melodies. Selenera kept her expression neutral, centuries of political maneuvering coming to her aid. The girl has been dealt with. A minor security breach. Nothing more. Has she? Nexus leaned forward. Then perhaps you can explain why Council Member Zax has been accessing records from the Great Severance period. Records specifically about your previous associations. In the archives, Arya's fingers danced across the control interface, searching through layers of encrypted data. The truth was here somewhere, hidden in the official records of the Great Severance. She found marriage records first, hundreds of them, all involving human-alien pairs, all mysteriously dissolved within the same month. Then she found it, the official death certificate for Marcus Kane, human musician, bonded mate to Lady Selenera Voss. The cause of death was listed as transport malfunction, but attached was a sealed file that required additional clearance. Arya's hands shook as she applied Zax's override codes. The file sprung open, revealing the truth in cold, official language. There had been no accident. Marcus Kane had been assassinated, a warning to other noble houses about the consequences of human integration. And there was more: medical records, birth certificates, and most damning of all, genetic modification orders for an infant girl. Back in Selenera's study, Lord Nexus was still speaking, his words dripping with veiled threats. The Purity Coalition has worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to maintain the proper order of society. We would hate to see your impeccable reputation tarnished by old mistakes. Selenera felt something shift inside her, like ice cracking in spring. Mistakes, she said softly, dangerously. Is that what you call love, Nexus? Is that what you call family? Family, he sneered. That human was a contamination of our bloodline, and that abomination you called a daughter. The crystal decanter on Selenera's desk shattered, shards flying outward as her control slipped. Be very careful with your next words, Nexus. In the archives, Aria downloaded the last of the files just as alarms began to blare. The security loop had failed earlier than expected. She could hear the heavy tread of security drones approaching, their metallic footsteps echoing through the corridors. But she had what she needed, proof not just of her identity, but of a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of celestial prime society. The Purity Coalition hadn't just separated families. They had orchestrated a systematic purge of human influence from alien culture. As she ran through the darkened corridors, her father's melody played in her mind. She understood now why it had been so important to him, why he had made sure she learned it before he died. It wasn't just music. It was a key, designed to trigger the dormant alien genetics in her blood. She emerged from the archives into chaos. Security forces were mobilizing across the city, and above, the spires of Celestial Prime blazed with emergency lighting. Someone knew what she had found, and they were determined to silence her before the truth could spread. In her study, Selenera watched the security alerts flooding in with a mixture of fear and fierce pride. You never understood, did you, Nexus? She said, rising from her seat. You thought you could erase love with laws, replace family bonds with political convenience. We gave you everything, he snarled. Power, position, respect. You gave me a prison. She cut him off. One built of lies and enforced by fear. But now, she smiled as her crest crystals began to resonate with a distant melody. Now my daughter is about to remind everyone what we lost, what you stole from us. Aria ran through the streets of Celestial Prime. The stolen data clutched to her chest like a precious instrument. Behind her, security forces closed in, but ahead lay Nova Heights Concert Hall, where even now the city's elite gathered for another evening of carefully controlled cultural expression. She smiled grimly. It was time for them to hear a different kind of music, the kind that could shatter lies and rebuild truths, the kind her father had died trying to preserve, the kind that proved that human passion and alien precision could create something greater than either alone. The concert hall loomed before her, its crystal spires reaching toward the stars. Inside, the truth waited to be heard, and with it, the power to change everything. A symphony of truth. Nova Heights Concert Hall blazed with light, its crystal architecture amplifying not just sound but tension. Inside, the elite of Celestial Prime gathered for what they thought would be another evening of carefully curated harmony. They had no idea they were about to witness a revolution wrapped in melody. Aria burst through the service entrance, her pursuers close behind. Her hybrid nature was now impossible to hide. Crystals had erupted across her skin in patterns that mirrored her mother's, glowing with inner light that pulsed in time with her racing heart. The cleaning staff who had once helped her didn't try to stop her this time. They simply stepped aside, sensing the weight of destiny in her passage. On the main stage, a quartet of alien musicians paused mid-performance as Aria emerged from the wings. Security drones hovered at the hall's entrances, but they didn't advance. In the ensuing silence, she lifted her violin to her shoulder. 20 years ago, her voice rang out clear and strong. Music died in Celestial Prime. Not the processed harmonies you hear today, but real music, the kind that burns and heals, that bridges worlds and hearts. Lady Selenera stood at the entrance of the Grand Hall, Lord Nexus and his security forces behind her. Her daughter's words struck her like physical blows, each one peeling away layers of carefully maintained pretense. You speak of purity, Aria continued, her eyes sweeping the crowd, of maintaining order. But what you really mean is fear. Fear of change, fear of connection, fear of love itself. She began to play her father's melody, but this time it was different. The suppressants were completely gone now, and her hybrid nature sang through every note. The crystal formations on her skin resonated in harmony with the music, creating overlapping patterns of sound that filled the hall with impossible beauty. In the audience, alien crystals began to resonate in response. It started slowly at first, a chime here, a harmony there, but soon the entire hall hummed with remembered connections. This was how music had been before the severance, when human emotion and alien precision had worked in harmony. Lord Nexus stepped forward, his metallic scales bristling. "Stop this at once. Lady Selenera, control your—" "My daughter." Selenera's voice cut through the music like a blade of truth. "She is my daughter, Nexus. The one you told me had to be hidden away. The one you said would destroy everything we built." She laughed, a sound of breaking chains. "You were right about that last part, at least." Aria's music swelled, and with it came projections, the stolen archives displaying above the stage for all to see. Marriage records, birth certificates, death orders thinly disguised as accidents. The truth of the Great Severance lay bare in cold, official documentation. "You didn't just separate us," Aria's voice wove through the melody. "You tried to erase us. But you forgot something fundamental about humans. We don't forget. We don't stop loving. And we never, ever stop fighting for what matters." The security drones moved forward, but Lady Selenera raised her hand. Her crest crystals were fully resonating now, adding their own harmony to her daughter's song. One by one, other nobles joined in, their own crystals awakening to long-suppressed harmonies. Lord Nexus snarled, "This changes nothing. The coalition is finished," came a new voice. Council member Zax emerged from the crowd, his sensory tendrils rippling with determination. "We've already transmitted the archive data to every news outlet in the galaxy. The age of enforced purity is over." Aria's music reached a crescendo, human violin and alien resonance combining in ways that defied conventional harmony. In that moment, she was both her father's daughter and her mother's child, living proof that diversity bred not weakness, but transcendent strength. Lady Selenera moved forward through the crowd, her own crystal formations pulsing in sync with her daughter's. Tears streamed down her face, catching the light like liquid stars. 2 decades of rigid control crumbled as she climbed the steps to the stage. The music softened as mother and daughter faced each other. Aria lowered her violin, her hands trembling slightly. "Hello, mother," she whispered. Selenera reached out, touching her daughter's face with trembling fingers. Where their skin met, their crystals chimed in perfect harmony. "My little starling," she breathed. "How brilliantly you've learned to fly." All around them, the nobles of Celestial Prime watched in stunned silence as one of their most prominent members embraced a human hybrid on stage. But they couldn't deny the beauty of the music still resonating through the hall, or the way their own crystals sang in response. Lord Nexus and his supporters could only watch as their carefully constructed world of separation and purity crumbled, brought down not by force or politics, but by the simple, undeniable power of music and love. The revolution had come to Celestial Prime, carried on the strings of a violin, and the unstoppable determination of a daughter to find her way home. And as mother and daughter stood together on that stage, their crystals singing in harmony, everyone present knew that nothing in their society would ever be the same. A new harmony. 1 month after the concert that shook Celestial Prime to its foundations, the city had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Crystal spires still pierced the violet sky, but now they resonated with new harmonies. Human and alien music intertwining freely for the first time in 2 decades. In the renovated garden level of the Voss estate, Aria sat at her father's restored piano, her fingers dancing across keys that had been silent for 20 years. Lady Selenera stood nearby, watching her daughter play with eyes that had forgotten how to hide emotion. The garden around them bloomed with crystal flowers that pulsed in time with the music, their colors shifting with each chord progression. "Your father would sit here for hours," Selenera said softly, running her hand along the piano's smooth surface. He said music was the purest form of truth, that it could speak what words couldn't express. Aria smiled, continuing to play as she spoke. Is that why you kept his piano? Even after everything? I couldn't bear to destroy it, just as I couldn't truly destroy the love that created you. Selenera's crystal formations shimmered with remembered pain. I thought I was protecting you by sending you away. I never imagined that I'd inherit both your determination and Father's stubborn creativity. Aria finished with a gentle laugh. Her own crystals caught the light, their pattern a perfect blend of human and alien genetics. Outside the estate's walls, Celestial Prime was transforming. The Purity Coalition had collapsed under the weight of revealed truth, its leaders facing justice for decades of orchestrated separation and violence. Council member Zax had been appointed to lead a new integration committee, working to reconnect families torn apart by the Great Severance. But change brought its own challenges. Not everyone welcomed the return of human influence to alien society. There had been protests, political resistance, even a few attempted attacks on newly reunited families. Yet for each act of opposition, there came an overwhelming response of support. Lady Selenera, a soft chime announced the arrival of a visitor. The students are here. Aria's fingers stilled on the piano keys as a group of young aliens and humans filed into the garden. They were the first class of the new Harmony Academy, an institution dedicated to preserving and teaching the combined musical traditions of both species. Selenera stepped forward, her regal bearing now tempered with warmth. Welcome to your first lesson in xenoharmonics. Today, my daughter will demonstrate how human music can interact with our crystal resonance patterns. As Aria began to play, the students watched in wonder as her hybrid nature expressed itself through both traditional notes and crystal harmonies. One young alien girl, her own crystals just beginning to form, stepped closer to the piano in fascination. How do you make them work together? She asked, eyes wide with curiosity. The same way any seemingly different things work together, Aria answered, patting the bench beside her. With patience, understanding, and the willingness to find beauty in unexpected places. The lesson continued, but Selenera's attention was drawn to a small holographic notification hovering discreetly at the edge of her vision. More families had been found, humans and aliens seeking to reconnect after years of enforced separation. The work of healing was far from over, but each day brought new progress. Later that evening, as the twin suns of Celestial Prime painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, mother and daughter stood on the estate's highest balcony. Below them, the city hummed with a new kind of energy, the vibrant chaos of two cultures learning to blend once again. I received a message from the Galactic Arts Council today, Selenera said, her voice carrying a note of pride. They want us to perform together at the Centennial Celebration, the first mother-daughter hybrid performance in their history. Aria's crystals pulsed with joy, creating tiny rainbows in the evening light. What shall we play? Your father's melody, of course. But perhaps, Selenera's expression turned thoughtful. Perhaps it's time to compose something new as well. Something that speaks of loss and finding, of breaking and healing. A song of coming home. Aria agreed, taking her mother's hand. Where their skin met, their crystals chimed in perfect harmony. Below them, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, other families were finding their way back together. Other truths were emerging from silence. The Great Severance had failed in its ultimate goal. Love, like music, could not be contained by laws or borders, or even the vast distances between stars. In the garden below, Aria's father's piano stood as a testament to persistence, its restored wood gleaming in the starlight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new resistance to change, new harmonies to master. But tonight, in this moment, mother and daughter stood together, their combined music rising to join the eternal song of the cosmos, a song that had always known that the greatest strength comes not from purity, but from the beautiful complexity of unity and diversity. The story that had begun with shame and rejection had transformed into something else entirely, a symphony of healing, a melody of hope, and above all, a testament to the enduring power of human determination and love to change the very stars themselves.